What's going on, everybody? This is your man, Dr. John C. Turner, aka the Professor JT, and I'm here with another episode of the Doc Chat. I got my man Evin Grant here, and going to let him go ahead and get started. We apologize. We want to send love to my friend Trezanae Atkins. She came down with a little bug, so we're sending prayers her way. So we're gonna go with the one-man show. Evin Grant, he's up. He's here. Welcome to the Doc Chat. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you got your law degree, as we are talking about all things law school and some of the work that you're doing now. So, Evin, welcome to the Doc Chat.
Thank you, Dr. Turner. Thank you for having me. It's amazing. Didn't ever see myself on the Doc Chat, but it's good to be here. So, Evin Grant, I grew up in Durham, North Carolina, and after some years of life, eventually got my law degree at Campbell University, Norman Adrian Wiggins School of Law in downtown Raleigh, North Carolina. And so there's a story about the law school. It originally was not in downtown Raleigh, and so we can get into that as we talk a little bit more. Right now, what I do is I serve as the policy director for the North Carolina Department of Administration. Can talk about that a little bit more. I like definitely discussing what we call kind of non-traditional or alternative JD positions or roles. And so we can get into that a little bit, but yeah, I'm just ready to answer questions. I want to see the chat popping off. I want to see, just hear what you have to say. Cause I mean, this is something I get to talk about a lot. And I enjoy talking about with different people. And so it's good to be in this space and getting a larger audience to really talk about the journey and what you can do with it.
That's epic. That's epic. Yeah. We appreciate you. Appreciate you, sir. Want to give a shout out to my man, Curtis Valentine, Real Men Teach. Got the great on swag. Make sure you go to Real Men Teach, support the movement. We're trying to get more Black males teaching in our education system. Now, Evin, I'm telling you right now, this is a special moment, because what people don't realize, and I looked at the statistics, majority of your doctors are medical in that medical field. But a lot of people don't know the second highest rated doctoral completions are from lawyers. Yeah. Individuals get those JD degrees. So we're going to jump right into this. And hey, if you're checking out the Doc Chat, let me know in the comments that you're here. If you graduated from law school, if you're in a law school, any doctorate program you completed, let us know in the chat. We love to have you and show you here on the Doc Chat as well. Now, let's go into that story a little bit. You was that little guy growing up in Durham. How did you end up at Campbell University School of Law?
Oh, man. Okay, so I'm going to put it out there, and this is part of my story. I never intended to be a lawyer. It's real. It's probably somewhere around middle school, high schow, I started to appreciate and understand my passion for animals. So around high school, I had opportunities to summer intern at Duke University. They had the Duke Primate Center there in Durham. As I got through, junior, senior year of high school, I started working at an animal hospital and decided I wanted to be a veterinarian. So I originally went to NC State for animal science.
Wow.
And that was the journey that I wanted to go on, was to be a veterinarian and primarily work with domestic animals. So our cats, dogs, the things most people have as pets, or big cats, so lions, tigers. I was really big into big cats or primates. And so lemurs, chimpanzees, gorillas, our basic monkeys. So that was my interest coming out of high school. Got to NC State, and with NC State being a big agriculture school, most of my animal science courses really geared towards large livestock. So you're talking cattle, goats, horses, pigs. Animals that I just personally, we just did not get along as well. So about halfway through college, had a conversation with my advisor, and he was asking me what some of my interests were, what were some of the things that I was keeping up with. And at this time, Barack was preparing to run for his first term. So for anybody, that's when I was in college. Barack wasn't president yet. And so so they try to age me now because I probably look like I'm 28. And so I'm talking to my advisor and we're having a conversation about, well, I'm really interested in what I've been seeing politically. And right now we're just seeing something historic happen with Barack Obama, preparing to run for president. So he asked me, he was like, well, have you ever considered any kind of political science, criminal justice type of courses? And so I was like, no, didn't know much about it. I came to undergrad thinking I was going to be a veterinarian. So I really hadn't looked at, what other options were. I had a lot of teachers in my family. So I knew about, your Englishes and your maths and, those directions, but I don't think I was as knowledgeable about what there was to do in college. So took a few courses around political science and eventually changed my major to criminology. And it was a Bachelor of Science in Criminology, and they had a separate Bachelor of Arts, which focused more kind of like on the human aspect, where I think the Bachelor of Science in criminology focused more on the environmental aspects, but still kind of just that study of crime, generally how the human finds opportunity for crime, how we react to certain environmental factors, a lot of that nature versus nurture as it relates to, who becomes a criminal aspect. And so that was very interesting at the time. And I did fairly well switching my major to criminology. But at that point, I still didn't know what I wanted to do with it. Finished up. So was working at an animal hospital through like my first 2 years of college, ended up transitioning into an opportunity with the federal government, working for the National Institute of Health, just doing some administrative work. And then that eventually opened up our opportunity to serve as a magistrate judge in Wake County in North Carolina. So at around 24 years old, I was probably, if not the youngest, one of the youngest magistrate judges in Wake County, and had an opportunity to do that and really learn about our criminal justice system behind the scenes. I mean, I worked literally in a jail. And that really exposed me to a lot about our criminal justice system, a lot about the process. Because I mean, we work kind of in two spaces as a criminal magistrate. Once the officers coming in after they've, initially just arrested someone. So we're processing someone after their arrest. They're getting their fingerprints. Then they come before us as a magistrate judge to get their court date, to get their bond before they're put in a holding cell to either bond out or wait their first appearance. The other side of that, we had officers who were coming in to swear a process such as a search warrant, an arrest warrant for someone they don't have in custody, and then a few other kind of like civil-ish matters on that side. Wow. And so, that's what I'm doing at 24 years old. And so that was really my introduction into that space. But magistrate judges, like all of our judges, are elected positions. The only difference is our magistrate judges aren't elected by the public. They're elected by certain members of our court system. So after my initial term ended, I didn't have the opportunity to come back. And that's when like my journey into I have no clue what I want to be when I grow up started. So from there, and so I'd been doing photography at this point while I was a magistrate for maybe 2 or 3 years, kind of on the side. So I actually went into photography full time at that point. So before it was, I was doing portraits and a few things here and there for friends and family. By the time I left the magistrate's office, I was doing fashion shows. I had done a few weddings, and just really kind of like developed as a photographer for several months before getting an opportunity to work at an engineering firm.
Oh, wow. Wait a minute.
Don't ask. I don't know. No, so what happened, I signed on with a temp agency, and somebody at this engineering firm was going on maternity leave. And so they needed someone to do administrative work. A lot of what I'd done in the magistrate's office, or a lot of what I'd done for the federal government, I had a pretty good administrative background. So I come in and kind of fill in for her while she's on maternity leave. She decides not to come back because it made more sense for her to stay home, with the child than to pay for childcare. So they ended up offering me the position that she had. But then they realized they needed more resources when it came to some of the quality control for some of the engineering projects that they were doing.
Wow.
So I spent maybe 3 months learning how to do AutoCAD.
Hey, my bachelor's in electronic technology. I remember that CAD, key,
right.
all those everything. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, so you understand. And mind you, I came from animal science and criminology. I did take one semester of computer engineering, and that's about it. After I got to calculus 3 and they stopped using numbers and it was all words, I said, this ain't even math anymore.
We don't care what it is. We're not
right. I don't need to know the derivative of H. I don't need to know how long it takes to approach infinity. No. I just need simple math and to file my taxes. That's it. And so I'm learning AutoCAD, and that opened up an opportunity for me to be hired on kind of in a quality control position. But knowing I didn't have an engineering background, there were no promotional opportunities for me. I couldn't do anything beyond what I was doing because I didn't have an engineering degree.
Wow.
And so right there, I kind of just sat in a space of, well, what degree do I have and what can I do with it? So NC State, and I'm sure they still have it, but at the time on their website, you could go look at the college that you were a part of, look at the degree, and it had like a list of like potential careers with this degree.
That's incredible. Okay.
Yeah. And so, I'm scanning it. I'm seeing, forensic scientist, law enforcement, FBI agent, just a criminologist. I don't know what that is, but I see a lot of them on like these murder documentaries. I guess that's what you do. I guess you become a criminologist and you just do murder documentaries. And then I saw lawyer. And so, thinking back about my college career, mind you, part of why I switched away from animal science was because after you get a 1.9 GPA, maybe that's not the major for you. That was my college experience. Anytime I talk to somebody now, I'm like, look, when you go to class and when you get to class, stay awake. Like those are the primary things you need to do to be successful in college. And so, I'm thinking about like, okay, well, what are my options? College, I did well enough to graduate. And then, where do I want to see myself long term? So,
so tell us about those steps. Those steps are getting to that, going to law school. Were there certain choices of law schools you wanted to go to? Like, what was that process like?
Yeah, certainly. So actually, when I was a magistrate, so around 2007, 2008, Campbell was in the process of moving their law school from Harnett County, Bowie's Creek, North Carolina to downtown Raleigh. And I worked, in downtown Raleigh at the jail. And so I'm passing the law school, 2009, 2010. And I think one day I was at the light in front of the law school and was just like, I'm gonna go there one day.
Wow. Powerful.
Still had no intention of being a lawyer. I was just like, I'm gonna go there one day. I don't know what for, but
it was like, look, I gotta make this clear. I had no intention
to be a lawyer. And so, so as I'm sitting at this engineering firm thinking about what's next, I had to be serious about, okay, one, my GPA coming out of undergrad wasn't great, and I haven't taken the LSAT yet. So this is maybe late July, early August. The next LSAT, I think, was maybe like September. I applied for the LSAT and for the preliminary testing for the FBI at the same time. And so preliminary test for the FBI there is a knowledge-based test where you have to go to a computer center, but then there's also the physical aspects of the test. So, run a 1.5 miles within a certain time, a certain number of push-ups, a certain number of pull-ups. And so I'm training for the physical components of the FBI test while also trying to wrap my head around studying for the LSAT that I need to now apply for. So I apply for the LSAT. So I'm studying for the LSAT, still doing photography, still working a full-time job, and training for the potential FBI test 1, all within a month.
Wow.
So finally, I take the LSAT. I remember taking it. It was at Duke University. Walked in, and if you've listened to my timeline, at this point, there's like a 6-year gap between when I graduated undergrad and when I prepared to take the LSAT.
Wow.
So I'm mid-20s in a room with like 18, 19, 20-year-olds who are still in college, stressed out over the LSAT. And I'm like, look, I got a job. Like, I don't know why y'all so stressed. It's just a test. And so, I go in, take the LSAT. One time, I get a decent score, very median, very average.
What's a decent score? What should people shoot for?
So LSAT score runs from about a 120 to a 180, assuming it hasn't changed in the past 4 years. So median midway is going to put you about a 150.
Okay.
I mean, you basically get a 120 for showing up. Like,
okay.
It's like the SAT. Like, right. you get points for being there. Right. And so like, and I, at this point, I don't mind telling people like my LSAT score is a 150. I literally was the middle. Okay. But where you really want to aim is about a 154, 156.
Okay.
That starts really putting you in good competitive space, particularly as it starts coming to scholarshiping. Yeah. And if you look at most law schools, they have actually a data sheet. Every law school has to do it on their website that will tell you like their median GPA, their median LSAT, and then their quintiles or quartiles for like where different scores sit for their average for their classes, I think for maybe the past 3 years. Okay. And, you know, law school I went to typically sits high 150s, low 160s. And with 180 being the highest, I mean, you're talking, you need to be competitive to really consider getting into some of these top law schools. You know, once you start hitting 165, 170, you pretty much have a lot of leeway to really go where you want to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But so, you know, I come out and I'm like, I'm pray about it. Just the score I got, I'm gonna take it one time. I'm not taking it no more. Yeah. At that point, I knew I wanted to apply to Campbell, where I ended up going, just because of it had been downtown Raleigh. At this point now, currently, I've been in Raleigh probably 20 years. This would have been 2012.
Okay.
That I'm going through this process. And so I was like, I'm gonna apply to Campbell, and then being from Durham, I was like, I'll apply to NC Central. Okay. So applied to both of those law schools, and those were the only two I applied to. And that's just where my mind was at. It's I'm giving this to God. If it's meant for me to do, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So probably a week. So now we're in April timeframe, April, May 2013. Probably a week after I submit my application for NC Central, they send me a letter back that's just like, nah, bro. Like, that's basically what the first sentence said.
That's HBCU? Yeah, they probably would say that. Nah, bro.
Which I got. I mean, I came out of undergrad with a 2.7 GPA, and my LSAT was average, medium.
Makes sense.
And so at that point, I was like, well, I definitely know I'm not getting into Campbell. Look, and my former boss might be up here, who was the dean of Campbell, who's also one of my best friends. So I don't know if he knows all my story, but he knows.
Well, he know it now.
He know it now. So maybe a week after getting rejected from Central, I get a letter from Campbell that waitlisted me. Okay. And I was like, well, that's not a no.
Right. That's some hope.
So that's some hope.
That's the Jesse Jackson hope right
there. Yeah. And I don't know what happened between the waitlist letter and a phone call I got on like July 3rd. Mind you, my birthday is July 5th. So this was a great phone call.
Wow.
That said, hey, Evin, if you're still interested in coming to Campbell, we need your seat deposit by the end of the week.
Wow.
I said, I will call you back. I called my mama and was like, look,
we need this change real quick.
We got things to do today.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. Like,
okay.
So, you know, that was my journey into law school. Like I said, never intended to be a lawyer per se. But now I had a lot of friends who, even when I worked in the master's office, they were like, Evin, you should be a lawyer. You should think about law school. They didn't know my undergraduate story. You know, they didn't know like my credentials coming out of undergrad. I couldn't get into anybody's law school.
Wow.
And I also realized now I wasn't mature enough for law school.
Oh.
I needed those 6 years in between undergrad and law school to just grow as a person, to grow as an adult, and really appreciate what I was stepping into going into law school.
That makes sense. That makes sense. So now you have gotten into law school. Let's talk about those first at least 2 years, what you would consider the 1L, the 2L. Yeah. What kind of classes are you taking? What are you experiencing? Because technically you might be that little bit older law school student. What are you seeing now that you're at Campbell University in their school law?
So one thing I learned was I had no clue how to study. and I probably didn't understand how to read. So, you know, I'm what they consider, at this point, I'm what they consider a non-traditional student or second career law student. I started law school at 28 years old. And so I went into it like a job. Like I get there at a certain time in the morning, I have classes or I need to do whatever work that needs to be done. And then I end at a certain time. Now, my first year, I was commuting back and forth from Durham to Raleigh. I actually chose to stay with my parents that first year. It was commuting back and forth from Durham to Raleigh. So I intentionally stayed at school as long as possible before making the trek back to Durham. In that first year, and this is true for most law schools, you're going to take a lot of the foundational courses. So torts, which are just like your civil liability issues, contracts, property, criminal law, constitutional law. You'll likely take some research and writing course, and then civil procedure. I think I cover all of them. If not, somebody put in the comments if I'm missing a one of class. And so, you know, you're taking those courses, and it's different by law school. So when I was in law school, you would do part one during first semester, and then you would do part two second semester. So torts 1, torts 2. I know they've switched it now just because things happened during the pandemic that just required change. And so I know, you know, they switched, and I actually was working at Campbell Law School during that time. And so, you know, you're sitting in your classes, and what I tell people, law school doesn't teach you the law. It teaches you the foundational principles of the law, and then it teaches you how to think like a lawyer. That's it. You spend 3 years changing how you view information, how you receive information, how you analyze information, because your job as a lawyer is to take information that anybody probably has access to, but to make a risky decision about what to do with that information. You are paid to make the risky decisions. Wow. And so, you know, and that's what law school really prepares you to do. So, you know, you're sitting in class and you're learning the history of like how we got to murder as we understand it today. What are the elements? What do you need in the commission of a crime as it relates to intent? And so, you know, what I experienced, like contracts, I get it. Like, it was not meant for Black folk. But I mean, if you look at the history of it, it wasn't. I mean, you think, you know, and so like contracts was a very difficult class for me. I mean, I grew up, you know, I mean, I guess we say we grew up poor. And so having money was one thing. Understanding contracts, we never talked about that, you know, in our household.
The small print got us for years.
For years. I mean, and there are cases about that. I mean, there's a case, you know, about how a company did, I think it was a Black woman wrong based on some fine print. You know, so you're sitting and you're learning that. I remember sitting in crim law, which for me, crim law came a little more naturally because of the years I spent as a magistrate judge. You know, I'd learned so much about how to understand the elements, how to understand how to read the elements for criminal law where it made sense. But then I had to learn the history. Like, you know, you had to learn how crimes built up to what we got to as murder, or what we understand as breaking and entering, and understanding kind of some of the nuance of that. And then you also had to talk about the racial components of a lot of that. Why crimes are crimes that they are. Why intent has to be, you know, viewed the way it's viewed. Why, you know, what constitutes self-defense and the racial implications and the history of that. So you're sitting in there, you know, learning that aspect. Real property. Some of the earliest cases around real property are around slave ships and who owns the slaves in them.
Man, that's real.
And that's what you're learning. Constitutional law. I mean, that won't written for us, no way. We got to go into that.
That'd be a whole other show.
Right. That's a whole different show. But I mean, you're sitting in class and you're learning about the Dred Scott case, where I mean, you have a Supreme Court justice who's like, you can't even bring a lawsuit because you're not human. You Black. But you have to sit in that. And that's your first year of law school. And just as much as you're sitting in that learning it, you're also expected to perform as well, if not better than your counterparts, because in law school, you're graded on a curve scale. And so, you know, you take an exam, and this was my first year experience where you don't have a midterm. Your only grade in law school is your final exam. So you don't know until the end of the class if you understood everything you just learned. That has changed in some aspects. Now they are doing more testing. You're starting to see more benchmarking, and that's not like a Campbell specific thing. Like that is just how law school was done. But I think you're just starting to see just a shift in how law schools, do their pedagogy just at large. Wow. But so you're sitting in a class for however many weeks a semester is, taking notes, doing outlines. And then you have one exam at the end that determines if you pass or fail that class, and you're scored almost based on how well you do in comparison to your classmates. Wow. And so on the curve scale, what ends up happening is basically, say you have 50 people in a class, everybody, takes the test. Essentially what happens is they look at, well, what's the kind of the mean and median of where most people align. Yeah. And wherever that fits, that's competent. And that's about an 85. Mm-hmm. Everybody else then now gets branched across that. So your grades are going to kind of look like an upside down bell curve where most people should be in the middle. You're going to have some people who did not perform well, who are going to be, on the back end. And you're going to have some people who just outperformed everybody else. Mm-hmm. But a good chunk of your class should be competent, which is hard for a lot of students. And this is what I used to tell students through orientation. When you take everyone who was in the top 10% of their high school and undergrad class and put them in one room, all of them can't be the top 10% anymore. And for people who tend to go to law school, they've been told their whole life they're the smartest of the smart to get into law school. Where everybody's right. They're told they're the 1%. Then you get to a room where everybody's the 1%, and now they just got their first B. They just got their first C. They might have just failed their first class. Yeah. And that's difficult for a lot of people entering into law school. And I'm gonna take a moment to turn on some light in here because I have a big old window and it's getting dark outside.
You go right ahead, because what I'm about to do is just make sure everybody know, hey, we on the doc chat with my guy Evin L. Grant. He's talking about his experience at Campbell Law School and all those nuances of how he got through, and some real talk on some things that I didn't even know about when it came to law school, which I appreciate. Now we're gonna go into you're getting done, you're wrapping up law school, then that dreaded thing that happens, taking that bar exam. What was that like? What came about that part of your journey when you were coming through law school?
Yeah, so that was an interesting time because at this point now you've done your 3 years. You go in and now what those 3 years were simply preparation for this next month and a half.
Okay, because you graduate and you are technically you have your Juris Doctorate.
You're a lawyer. Once you graduate, you're a lawyer. Period. Everybody that walks across the stage is a lawyer.
You're a lawyer. Okay.
Basically, you've studied the law. Okay. The test is what kind of is the rite of passage between you're a lawyer to you're an attorney, or some people designate it Esquire. That's more of a kind of a geographic thing. You may hear that more kind of in like the Caribbean area, and certain other countries will use Esquire, where we kind of all just say we're all lawyers. But there is a technical distinction between lawyer and attorney once you take the bar and pass it. And so in preparation for that, you have to get some bar prep course. Right. It's not something that you can just go in cold. It's not something that you can just think that the past 3 years of law school has prepared you, for what's now a 3-day test. When I took it, it was a 2-day test. Well, I think it's still a 2-day test with like a at-home component. When I took it, it was just a 2-day test, 6 hours each day. And so what you're doing pretty much between graduation and the bar exam, which is usually, I want to say around the last week of July, is you're basically studying nonstop. We said this in another chat. You're basically studying like 8 to 10 hours a day, almost 8 days a week, like, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah, because I've seen a lot of people, they literally like go off the grid. Like I'll talk to you in 3 months type stuff.
Right, basically. And you have to. And so you're preparing, you're using this bar study course. And it's made in a way that makes you feel like you will never catch up, because you never want to get to a point where you feel like you've done enough for that day, because you likely have not. Okay. And they're built in a way where you always feel like there's more to do, because there's probably something that you need to prepare yourself for. Okay. And so the bar exam, and it's changed since I took it. So I'll talk more about when I took it. Now it's the uniform bar exam, where you can use your score across several different jurisdictions. And I think there's probably about 28, like high 20s, maybe 30 states that'll allow you to use your score to get barred there. When I took it, it was North Carolina only.
Gotcha.
And so, your first day, I believe there's 6. So it's torts, contracts, property, civil procedure, constitutional law, and family law were your essay day. And so day 1 is 6 hours, 3 hours before lunch, 3 hours after lunch. And you're writing essays, 12 essays. So you probably much get 6 in the morning, 6 in the afternoon. Wow. So you're mentally preparing for that, just the time grind of the bar exam. Okay. And so part of your study is I need to just be engaged in studying for hours on end, because I'm going to have to be engaged in testing for hours on end.
Wow, you're like an athlete working out for a marathon or something.
Right. Wow. And then so that's day 1. Day 2, I want to say it was 150 questions before lunch, 150 questions after lunch, multiple choice. And it may only be like 4 or 5. There were only like 4 or 5 topics there. And so during the bar exam, you're basically going back through the grind of almost relearning everything you learned about the foundational principles of some of those courses. So torts, civ pro, criminal law, constitutional law, criminal procedure. So you're kind of going back through understanding the foundational principles of those, because then you're taking an exam where most of the questions aren't what's the right answer. They're all what's the best answer.
What's the best? Yeah.
There is no right answer. And that's just something you come to learn in the law. There is never really right or wrong in the law. It's more, what do the facts say? And the facts, and something we always learn, the facts change the outcome every time.
So how long did you have to wait before you got your results? What was that wait like for you? And I actually see within the last couple of weeks, a few people have got their spring results.
Yeah. So for me, thankfully, I was employed during that time. And so I was able,
like you were sitting around.
I was able to stay active at least during the day. And so the wait was, so, you take it into July, the results historically come out right before like the week of Labor Day.
Okay.
And so we always would joke, because either you would see people partying for the extra day during Labor Day, or you would just not see them at all based on the results.
So you did yours in the summer.
Yeah. So you take it into July, and basically the whole month of August, you're waiting.
Gotcha.
And I mean, during that time, you're just like, okay, how long is it going to take to score? You're checking the website every day to see if they've posted any news or something about it. I think I found out that it came in the mail the day it came, because historically the schools would find out before the students would, and they would get a list. So now it's changed where everybody finds out at the same time. And I think at the time, once the school's notified, usually within 2 days, we would get it in the mail.
Okay.
And so I started seeing friends post on like Facebook that they had got their results. And so I left work early that day. I bailed out, went and checked my mailbox. Mailbox was empty. And so I'm just sitting, and at this point, like I'm sitting, and where I stayed at the time, I had a window where I could see the mailbox. And literally I am sitting in the window. Mail person comes by, I like run down. They put the mail in the thing. I just snatch it out. I'm like, I close it. Like, let me get that. And so I get the results, and I just take a picture of them and send it to my mom, and that's it.
Wow.
Like I never posted about it online, and I didn't, because I had friends who didn't pass. People who had studied with me who didn't pass. But my whole study experience was, I had an accountability buddy. He and I, every day, probably 8 o'clock in the morning, we were at the school. We would stay at the school until about 4 o'clock. We would go to the gym from like 4:30 to 6, and then we would go our individual ways and study at home for the rest of the evening. I mean, you're doing your daytime class, you're making time for lunch, you're making time for dinner. Then in the evening, you have assignments that you need to do. Yeah. It's not like it says like, here are your evening assignments. It's just like you have a list of to do that you just need to get done. And so you tend to spend your evenings doing more work. I mean, on average, you probably study 12 hours a day, 14. And And I tell most people, create a study schedule where you have rest. So like the gym was rest for us. So we would go to the gym. That would give us time to process what we studied, give us time to like replenish ourselves, eat dinner, and then, study that evening before bed. Then personally, what I would do is I would study Saturday morning until about 5 p.m. And I would take a break from Saturday 5 p.m. until Sunday 5 p.m. And that was like my day. So whether that was like I wanted to watch a show, play video games, link up with friends, Sunday morning if I wanted to go to church or watch church on TV, it wasn't that popular yet. And then by Sunday afternoon, I'm back into it, grinding out, preparing for, the next week. And you pretty much do that up until the week before the bar. And that's typically when the course ends. Okay. And then you have about a week of kind of self-study. And during that week of self-study, we probably got to the law school 9 o'clock in the morning, didn't leave until like 2 a.m., the next morning. Because at that point, it's just information load. Yeah. It's like anything we missed, anything we didn't understand. We need to do practice exams. We need to do practice multiple choice. We need to do practice essays. And you have a week at that point before the exam. And the exam's usually Tuesday, Wednesday. And we tell people, and we did the same thing, is on the Monday before the bar exam, do nothing. Like absolutely nothing. Don't read anything. Don't study anything. I had friends who went to the movies, friends who like went hiking. I think for me, like I just spent a whole day like cooking. Like that was just what I enjoyed doing. And so, I spent that whole Monday. I made a big breakfast, a big lunch, a big dinner, but then had enough left over. So for the exam days, I could have leftovers. And so you're grinding out, then you take the exam for those 2 days. And our motto was one and done. As soon as we walked into the classroom to study, we were right on the top of the board, one and done. Nice. And then we would start studying.
That's incredible.
Yeah. Absolutely. And so that was the process, and it stays with you.
Oh yeah. I can imagine. I'm telling you, man, we are rocking and rolling here on the Doc Chat. Mr. Evin Grant telling us about all things law school. We're going to have some fun right now. We're going to go into some things and kind of show you some work that Evan's working on here. First, I want to show a video. I think this video is really kind of important to where we're talking about today. So let me see if I get this pulled up here and we'll go into it. I don't think Evan's seen this, so definitely will want his thoughts. Let's see. I know it's on. Start over. Give me a second. See if I can get this to work real quick. Hold on. Stop right there. Let's see if we get this. Try one more time. I'm working on a live stream for some reason, but it's okay. All right, we'll probably move on for this, but we'll go ahead and
put a link to it and get people.
Yeah, we might have put a link to it. So basically, if nobody's ever seen that, the video is called The Look. And what's powerful about that video is the fact that there are individuals who are in fields, just as Evin is in law school and is an attorney, and you get these particular looks as an individual. Let's see if it plays here now. Yeah, YouTube don't want to play today, but that's all right. So let's go to your work here. Make sure we get that up because that's important. You wrote this article a couple years ago. Why do you feel like we need more Black lawyers? And you hit on some tips here, like how there's not enough. We need the representation, the specific barriers that are there, how hard the LSATs are, qualified diverse applicants, submitting last minute admissions applications, some things that we want individuals to know, like you can do this. Right. Why is it so important that we have more Black lawyers, and why did you feel was imperative to write about this?
Yeah. So I don't remember where I was mentally. I do know I was working at the law school at this time. I think it's before I was promoted from director of student life to dean of student life. But I just been encountering a lot of people, particularly in undergrad, who had an interest in law school, actually in high school, who had an interest in law school, but never saw Black lawyers outside of some of the spaces that I was occupying. And so at the time, I want to say I was the president of the Capital City Lawyers Association, which was the Raleigh's Black lawyers. And so the picture at the top is actually that organization, the Capital City Lawyers Association. We did that photo. I want to say, I mean, this is during the pandemic. You can see most of us had the mask on shortly after the murder of George Floyd. And so we actually did that photo in front of the Wake County Courthouse the June prior. And so just kind of in a space where, historically we would host our Youth Law Day through the Capital Cities Lawyers Association. We would host various scholarships through the Capital City Lawyers Association. And what we started hearing, not so much from the students, but from the parents, was that we don't know any Black lawyers other than y'all.
Wow.
They're not in our communities. They're not in our neighborhoods. And I mean, for the most part, if you saw me walking through Walmart and how I look every day, you're not going to know I'm a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I'm not the stereotypical what we think. I mean, there was a point where you Google lawyer and you pretty much get pictures of white men. And so societally, we never saw images of people that look like us, particularly in the legal profession, unless you are a part of the profession. Mm-hmm. And so as I talked to students, both high school, college, and even students in law school, it was like, okay, we need more representation because we're having all these conversations about DEI. There's a lot of what's happening around Black Lives Matter. There's a lot happening around social justice, and there's not enough of us to really create the impact that we desire. Because it's like, to be quite honest, power is powerful. And without power, you don't really have the ability to make progress. And, we have our peaceful protests. You have your ways of negotiating. What's going to be the toughest, the strongest is going to be voting, getting the right people in the right places. But at the same time, it's getting the right people in the right places. I mean, we need the right people available to be in the right places.
That's right. That's true. That's true.
And, lawyers just generally have an ability and have a knowledge base to be fluid in a lot of different spaces just because of how we're taught to think. And so it's just like, we need more Black lawyers. Like, we need more people who look like us in positions that allow for power, that can allow for progress. And so the article speaks a lot to just statistically, only 5% of lawyers are Black. I think 2% are Black women. You tend to not see a lot of Black lawyers in high level executive spaces, particularly within law firms. Very few make it to like partner level. Very few, unless they own their own firm, ever see their name on a firm. But then also the needs of what our people are often come through lawyers, and we need more lawyers who can do that. And so I talk about, needing more intellectual property lawyers, because we do have a lot of Black inventors. We have a lot of Black artists who need to copyright their work. We have a lot of Black designers who need to trademark their work. And so we need more Black lawyers to help represent them. I think of what Jalen Hurts, all of his agents, Black women.
Black women.
We need more sports lawyers.
That's right.
Sports and entertainment lawyers. We need more lawyers to help Black families with property, particularly as it comes. You think about the rate at which gentrification is happening, and we have a lot of families who are just willingly selling their property because the money sounds good, but had they had the right representation, they may have been advised differently.
That's right.
So, we need more Black real estate attorneys, more Black, property attorneys. As our generations age, particularly here in North Carolina, in the year 2030, there will be more people over the age 65 than people under the age of 18.
Oh, okay.
We need Black lawyers helping, our aging population think about their wills, trust, and estates. What are you going to do with your property when you pass?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so the article gets really specific about why we need more Black lawyers in very specific spaces, because you tend to see majority of Black lawyers in family law or criminal defense. But that's just because it's what we were exposed to. We watched Law and Order. We watched all these other shows about lawyers. The only lawyers we know are Judge Mathis and the people.
There's Maybelline, and it's true. It's true.
Yeah, and so we need more lawyers to create more exposure to what you can do as a lawyer. I'm a lawyer who does not practice law traditionally. I work for the government. And so the article then, once it kind of breaks down the need, it starts talking about the process, what the admissions process is like, how do you need to start early, because you need to get your transcripts, you need to get certain history, you need to get recommendations. So, you need to find people to speak on your behalf, and you need to take the LSAT. And then all of this has a cost. And so thinking about the cost of that, and it talks about then the process of law school a little bit, but then just considering long-term the cost. There's a cost to keep your license. There's a cost to, for different CLEs that help maintain your license. There's a cost for the bar that you're a part of in the district that you practice in. There's a cost for the bar exam. I think a couple $1,000s. But then the conversation in there is about like how to overcome some of those barriers. There's even some information about preparation. Like before, like I had to provide more information for the bar exam than I did for the FBI.
Oh, wow. I believe it. And I've heard of that. I've heard of it too. Yeah.
But I mean, it's you always have to think about it's the nature of the work you do as a lawyer. Like I said earlier, you are being taught how to make the risky decisions. And I know I say that very, very surface level, but when I was hosting orientation for the students, I said, you have to remember, your decision can determine if someone spends their life in jail.
True.
Your decision can determine if someone loses their life in jail.
Yeah.
Your decisions determine if a family is separated and if somebody loses their children.
Yeah.
Your decision can cost a business billions of dollars. Yeah. We're not making light decisions.
That's right.
We are altering the fabrics of people's lives on a daily basis. Yeah. And you have to be prepared for that.
Yeah. You got to do the best. You got to do the best you can. So we're going to, and I was able to find this, wasn't necessarily a video, but it was done by Procter & Gamble. And they did this a few years ago. And some just kind of go over, you look at these chapters of just a black man in society, the unconscious bias, the education from parents, family, that's a black man. What does that mean? Going to different places, restaurants. What do you look like as a black man? People who don't want you in their space. What does that look like as a black man? Even swimming pools. If anybody knows history of swimming pools, especially Black America, they used to put concrete in swimming pools so we wouldn't swim in them. Mm-hmm. Even just going to different places, shopping, stores, to finally realize this man is a judge.
Is the judge.
He was, and these are the things that we know as people, as Black Americans, we go through every single day. Right. You judged from as soon as you walk into a space, as soon as you're in a restaurant. So just kind of 2-3 minutes, just looking at that, Evan, kind of what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So interestingly, so every new lawyer has to take a professionalism for new attorneys course. I actually teach a DEI component of that professionalism for new attorneys. And we talk about it a lot in the aspect of not even judging other attorneys, but your clients may not always look and be like you. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you have to kind of check what those biases are in advance, because you may have a client come in and you already create an image about who you believe that client is. And that can determine if you think that client has a credible story and if you take that case. And something I think, we deal with a lot, particularly in professional profession. So, the PhDs, the master's levels, is this kind of, have you assimilated to the profession that historically you've been excluded from? Yeah. And so a lot of the looks just come from, one, just how society just looks at us. And I mean, like I said, I just started growing my locks a year ago. I haven't gotten close enough to the screen, but I have a nose ring that I got maybe a couple months ago. If I'm wearing a t-shirt, you can see a neck tattoo I got around the same time. So when I'm not like this or having with a tie on, that's how I'm viewed. And then go find me on LinkedIn and read my credentials. Like, you know.
I don't know if you remember, there used to be the 4 pictures, like this is Facebook, Instagram, you know, now it's TikTok and LinkedIn. And yeah, LinkedIn is totally different, you know what I'm saying? But we're still us. We're still us, you know what I'm saying? We have to be.
Yeah. And so I think what we're starting to see now, though, particularly on the back end of what we experienced after George Floyd, on the back end of what we experienced after the pandemic, is this new, I won't say it's acceptance yet, because I don't think it's acceptance, but it's this new appreciation for authenticity. Mm-hmm. And I think now as a people, you're more being judged for being judgmental than you are for being judged for who you are. And it almost, you can walk in spaces a little bit differently, because I realize like there's a privilege I have as a young Black male attorney. When I walk in a room, a lot of people don't want to oppose me because of the presumption of like, oh, I'm going to be called the racist. And so there's almost a privilege now of being able to walk in certain spaces. But then on the other hand, there are times where I walk in some spaces and it's like, how did he get in here? And I'm like, well, because my boss's boss is the governor. That's how I got here. Like that's how I got here. How did you get in here? And so, and I don't think there's ever going to be a space or time where that goes away, just because of the society that America is.
Yes, sir.
However, there is an opportunity that as more Black people and just people of color get into some of these leadership roles, get into some of the roles in which they have the influence to change the culture and environment of organizations, I think we will start to feel less pressure from a lot of that judgment.
No problem. Yeah.
That makes sense. And that's just going to take time. Like right now, I brag and say I probably work for one of the most diverse agencies in North Carolina government. If you go on our website and look at our leadership page, I mean, my boss is the first Native American woman to serve as the head of an agency. Our general counsel is a Black woman. I'm Black. We have a few other leadership that are Black. We have several women. And so for us, being in that space, I mean, our ages range. I'm the youngest on the executive team. And so that's our leadership. And so for us, we don't a lot of times feel kind of that pressure of the toxicity that you may feel in less diverse spaces. And we're all treated the same. Like today, we actually just all volunteered together at the food bank. And so like we're spending time almost developing a relationship as family, where for us, we don't feel a lot of that pressure that you may feel. Now you go to some of these other like law firm websites and click on the About Us or click on the attorneys here, and the pictures aren't going to quite look like that.
Yeah.
And that can be daunting for a lot of attorneys looking to step into certain roles, because it's like, well, I don't want to work in a law firm where everybody looks the exact same and it's not like me.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
Yeah.
So let's jump in just real quick, kind of go into that nice side hustle you got there.
Yeah.
And it's taking off real good now. You're taking off real good.
Yeah, we're probably about 15 years in. It actually started in college. I would travel and just do like landscape stuff. I had a little cheap camera at the time. But then a friend reached out and was like, hey, I noticed you have a camera. I need some headshots, because she was going, trying to do an acting gig. And I was like, all right, bet. We could take some. I don't know what the quality is going to look like, but I'll help you out. So took a handful and was like, okay, this is actually pretty cool. Like, this is fun. A lot of people on this page, probably everybody on that last page were probably lawyers.
Okay. So you helping out your people.
If I say probably everybody except for the guy in the white shirt and the guy in the gray suit, which actually the guy in the gray suit might be a lawyer now. I think everybody else are lawyers.
Nice.
But So
Wonderful.
had the opportunity to do some work with her. And then this was when Craigslist was still a thing. And so like I posted up there like, hey, new photographer looking for opportunities to work with somebody. And there was a lady who owned, it was Dominique's Boutique at the time. She actually also a lawyer up off, not too far North Raleigh, who was like, hey, I'm looking for a photographer to work with me. I need somebody to shoot a lot of my products, a lot of the models. And so she brought me in, gave me a chance to like work with her. And that's really like where I blew up, because at that point I was doing fashion shows with her. Any of the models who had worked with her, other photographers would see my work and learn about what I was doing. And so I had the opportunity to just like really start growing a photography business. But that was like my first passion right here, fashion and modeling. Nice. Like that was where I started. That is what I enjoy doing. I enjoy the creativity behind it, the flexibility behind it. But then it got to a point where, you still got to pay the bills. And so I started getting into like larger events. I started getting into weddings. I started doing a lot of like club shoots. And so, I was in the club with like Kelly Rowland. I was in the club with Plies. I was in the club with Yanni and somebody else from one of those reality shows. I don't remember the names.
They did all change. Yeah.
So Nick and Nicole right here, she's actually who got me in a lot of those spaces. Because she was working for K97.5 at the time.
Okay.
She would do it live at one of the clubs, and she would have me come in and photograph in the club. And so I met her. Through her, I got to meet Heather Victoria, who's on one of the photos with the blue shirt, like squatting down. And so Heather Victoria is like a pretty premier R&B artist who works with Ninth Wonder. So I had a chance to meet with him.
Oh, nice. Okay.
When I was working heavily with Heather Victoria. So photography is just something I like to do. I actually have a photo shoot coming up in May and was just asked today to do something a little bit bigger. And so that's my creative side, on top of my outlet.
Oh, yeah. Because you got to have that past, you doing your work in the law and different things like that, because it feels good. It feels good to do those things. Sure. So as we go ahead and wrap up, I do want to make sure I put out there for all the folks that don't know, we had breaking news this week. And we are turning a lot of these great stories that you are seeing on the Doc Chat into a wonderful book. So I would love your submission. So if you have graduated from any doctoral program, I want to get your abstract. So you can email me at theprofessorjt@gmail.com. And I'd love to hear those stories. So as we got a couple minutes left, Evin, tell folks where they can check you out at and some final words.
So the two places I'm probably most active, LinkedIn, Evin L. Grant on LinkedIn. Be sure to follow, connect. Also, anyone who has questions, want to meet one-on-one. Like I see, Dr. Hawkins, your question. That's definitely something we could chat about. If you want to reach out, I do virtual meetings. If you're local, I'll meet with people for coffee, for lunch. Because I know there are a lot of people who are interested in law, who are interested in the story about law, and just don't have anywhere to go to talk to someone. So definitely feel free to reach out. And then I'm somewhat active on Instagram. And so it's @ social media Evin, EVIN. Mostly I post travel and books. I'm not super active, but my stories can pop every now and then.
Okay, come with the stories.
Every now and then my stories get popping. But I post a lot. But LinkedIn is like literally where I live. Facebook for family. I'm too old to understand TikTok. So I let that go. Just let that be.
I already know it. Evin L. Grant, everyone, we appreciate you coming on the Doc Chat, just sharing your story. Man, you dropped downs better than Steph Curry on this mug today. And I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
We are going to keep on rolling, and the Doc Chat will be back with you next week. Until then, God bless y'all, and we'll talk to you later. Peace.
Thank you.